is that, and how does it contend with a biblical philosophy of reality?
Okay. Well, nihilism literally means nothingism. It comes from the Latin word nihil, which means nothing. But the idea is that for the nihilist, life is meaningless. There's no purpose to human life, that there's no rhyme or reason for anything, that life literally is pointless and absurd, that human life is nothing. Yeah.
How does that play with his idea of the Superman? How did that come into the picture for him?
Sure. Well, Nietzsche, of course, being a moral relativist, believing that human life is ultimately meaningless and that we therefore have a freedom, so to speak, to create our own meaning, Nietzsche then began to worship what he called the Übermensch, or the Superman, the man who asserts his own will over others, the man who creates his own reality, who creates his own purpose and meaning in life. Because in Nietzsche's worldview, in this atheistic worldview in which human life has no ultimate value or purpose, for whatever reason, he thought that the real hero, the man that really mattered, was the man who asserts his own will to achieve his own self-interested goals.
Sort of in a sense of overcoming the fact that there really is nothing out there of any value.
That's right. That's right.
All right. I'm really coming to something. It just popped in my mind. Really hadn't planned on this, but if I were to speak to someone who is an atheist but who is searching for truth, it seems like to me this is a great starting point. That a person must decide, or come to some terms at least in his initial quest to find truth. This is a very basic question: is there meaning or is there not? Is there, and that would to me lead to: is there value? Is there not? Is anything important?
That's right.
Or is it not? And those are basic questions for existence, and they all stem from the idea of there being a meaning to life that is outside of our own will. If there is there any alternative to God? In other words, do you see any possible way that we can have meaning and purpose to our lives, some reason to exist, to get up in the morning, to go on? Can we choose that logically and not choose God?
I don't think so. Of course, people often live with what we may call happy inconsistencies, which is the people that Nietzsche was trying to critique.
Yes.
But no, I think if there is no God and you're not willing to acknowledge that there's a God, then you might arbitrarily choose to live for some goal or purpose, whatever it may be. But that goal you choose is really utterly arbitrary.
Yeah, because even if you reach the goal, if there's no ultimate meaning, the goal is meaningless.
That's right. One of my favorite Christian philosophers, William Lane Craig, puts it this way, that if there is no God, then again, there's no intrinsic, inherent meaning to life, to human life, and there's no life after death, because we're all just going to perish into oblivion one day. And in fact, any goals that we might arbitrarily choose for ourselves, no matter how noble sounding they may be, ultimately don't matter. I like the way Bill Craig does this. He reminds us of H.G. Wells' famous novel, The Time Machine. And at the end of that novel, the time traveler gets in his time machine and he travels as far into the future as he can go, millions of years. And of course, H.G. Wells was an atheist, and he was assuming there was no God. And he gets to that, as far as he could go into history in the time machine, and he gets out of the time machine, and there's no life around. There's no birds flying around in the sky. There are no creeping things on the ground. There's just, all he can hear is the lapping of the ocean on the beach, and a few lichens on the rocks, and a very dim, glowing sun that's about to die out. And that's how, if the atheists are right, that's how everything's going to end. And so you might work for so-called noble causes like nuclear disarmament, or work against the AIDS virus, or work for all kinds of noble causes in this life. But if the atheist story is true, none of that is ultimately going to matter. It's all going to end in the heat death of the universe, and then who's going to care?
And I think it occurs to me that my job almost begins with helping people to see that logical conclusion. That the package it has irreducible complexity.
That's right.
You know, that if you buy into atheism, if you buy into macroevolution, which kind of is all this package goes together, you also must logically buy into meaninglessness.
To nihilism, yeah.
I don't think I listed this, but since we're talking about logic, I made a point on the earlier shows that logic itself is inescapable. And also that the reason that it's inescapable from a Christian standpoint, and I'm amazed how philosophical the Bible is, I think most people don't realize that, is that they are inherent truth, and logic that goes with it is inherent to the character of God. Is there a difference between Eastern and Western logic? Somebody would counter and say, well, that's your point of view, but in Eastern logic, things can be true and false at the same time. What's wrong with that?
Well, the main thing that's wrong with it is that it's self-defeating. The Eastern worldview, if you want to call it that, in fact, there's a little bit of a misnomer. Not everyone in the East believes that, that there's no logic, no objective logic. But some do. Some versions of Buddhism and Hinduism reject so-called Western logic. But if you take the Hindu and Buddhist worldview, this Eastern worldview, seriously, one of their major premises is that there are no distinctions to be made, that everything is ultimately one, and that this one thing that exists is neither this nor that. You can't describe it with human language. But at the same time then, these people who believe that there are no distinctions that can be legitimately made about anything want to make a distinction between Western logic and Eastern logic. But once you've done that, you've contradicted yourself. So the Buddhist says there are no distinctions to be made, but he makes a distinction between Western logic and Eastern logic. I would say he can't have his cake and eat it too. He can't have it both ways.
That's exactly right.
It's self-defeating. Not only that, this Eastern denial of logic, of real, ultimate, basic principles of logic, is something that really can't be lived out. And even the Buddhist and the Hindu can't live out this worldview that they seem to espouse. I always think it's kind of interesting and perhaps even humorous that the Buddhist still looks both ways before he crosses the street.
He can't create his own reality.
That's right. But if he's really right, if something can be true and false at the same time, if you can deny the law of non-contradiction and say it's not really true of reality, then he's got no reason to look both ways before he crosses the street. But he does. And I think that's just an indication that deep down the Buddhist and the Hindu know that logic is, that the principles of logic are true.
Again, it's like you were talking about earlier, that we just know these things, whether we want to admit it or not. We know it.
That's right.
We were way over the break here, and what I'm thinking is we'll go ahead and take a 30-second break and get the ad in for the program and all that, and we'll have to do a short wrap-up. But I really want to, before we do that, bring this home again, because the real issue here is, are there inherent truths? Is there a meaning beyond us? And if there is, are we responsible to be in touch with that? And of course, for the rest of this program, what we're going to talk about is if we're responsible to know it, are we accountable to it?
That's right.
And that's where you enter into the idea of right, wrong, forgiveness, and everything that goes from there.
Okay.
We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back to wrap this up quickly. And you have to watch next week to get the rest of this program. So stay with us till the end. Thanks.
We hope you're finding Church for Skeptics informative and helpful. We encourage you to email us topics concerning faith that you'd like to hear discussed on the program.
You have tried to mend your broken heart. You have cried till your tears have dried. The dryness of your soul is the empty well you have fallen in. Come talk to me. I am your father and your friend. Talk to me. Talk to me. Hi, welcome back to Church for Skeptics. We're here with Dr. Steve Cowan and having, I think, a great discussion. And again, what I want to reiterate, I have a mission. It was interesting. I took a taxi ride in Germany when I was there just last week, and took my life in my own hands by doing that. It was snowing at the time, and we were literally sliding all over the streets of Berlin. And I was praying, Lord, you really know, you know I need to make it to this meeting alive. And He answered the prayer. We got there. But I spent an hour with the taxi